third and final speaker is Professor David Hughes. Professor Hughes is the Emeritus Professor of Food Marketing at Imperial College London. He has lived and worked in Europe, North America, Africa, Asia, and Australasia. He travels around the world giving talks on the global food industry and on global food industry developments and their implications for food businesses. And he's going to talk to us today about how farmers can be leaders in the fight against climate change. Professor Hughes, over to you.
I'm delighted to be here. It's the first time I've been to OFC, and I'm a bit apprehensive because I'm familiar with OFC's sort of speed dating approach to presentations. I've got 10 minutes, and that's what. Read the title because that's roughly what I'm going to talk about. And there's a lot of slides here. I'm going to whip through them quickly. Look, as I sort of talk relentlessly around the known world, what is encouraging, the good news is that consumers and the broader global food system are increasingly aware of what they put in their tummies has an impact on their health and also an impact on the environment. But let's sort of focus on the environment because that's my topic, if you will. And so who do I think is pushing this? Who's at the front end around the world? And I think, honestly, it's young people. Wherever I go, it's young people who are often angry that particularly older boomers, that's me, have sort of buggered up the world and are doing nothing about it. And led by the wonderful Greta Thunberg, who's so driven by her Asperger's. She's just brilliant. So young people, they're the first group that is pushing the environmental agenda. But also some international governments. If we went back to COP26 in Glasgow, here is big government promising to cut methane emissions by 30% by 2030. I often reflect on, what level of discussion did they have farmers when they made that big promise? And then let's move to COP28 just recently. Rather late in the day, the UN climate talks take aim at planet warming food. It's just really getting on their agenda. Moving on, but it's more than international governments, it's also national governments. And we've seen that, of course, within the EU. The Dutch authorities are not offering to buy, threatening to buy farms, and it's financed by the EU. We're seeing exactly the same in Ireland at the moment, and of course, reflect back with Jacinda in New Zealand, the trouble she got into with the so-called fart tax there. Of course, we're into this, and we heard yesterday, I missed it actually, but the DEFRA guy was just adding more areas that they're going to support. It sort of intrigues me if I look at ELMS and the Sustainable Farming Initiative. For example, how dull am I? I looked at it's a challenging 200+ page read if you go through the SFI handbook. I mean, out of interest, how many people have been through those 200 pages from beginning to end? I mean, thank you. There'll be one or two, but for a lot of you, no offense, you haven't read a 200-page book since you were at school, for God's sake. And unlikely to do so, I would imagine. So, yes, it's our government is standing up and saying we're going to do something about the environment. And then there are food activists. And some of them we don't like particularly. I mean, this young man caused a bit of a stir, didn't he? A program on Channel 4 that really infuriated beef farmers. But there's a lot of them about, and they're very noisy. There are also erudite researchers from the best universities in the world, not least Oxford and Cambridge, who produce sort of brilliant pieces of work, and they're noisy about it. They want to tell the world about it. The one on the left is recent. The one on the right sort of interests me, that in the US, for example, heavy beef consumers, it turns out, it's only 12% of the USA population. They consume 60% of total beef. I think they're all builders, by the by. That's moving. So, who else is into this? Well, actually, Big Food is into this big time. PepsiCo, Walmart, and they're hugely resourced. 120 million, yes, let's invest it. I love this. Let's all chip in with McCain's regenerative agriculture campaign targeting Gen Z. And at McCain's, we don't just grow potatoes. Actually, I didn't think McCain grew potatoes. I think the farmers grow the potatoes, but that's another matter. And again, moving on, if I look at Europe, we've got Food Drink Europe. It really intrigued me that the members of Food Drink Europe are big business, agribusiness, and food companies and trade associations past the farm gate, I might say, and they have a distinct agricultural agenda. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. Farmer-defined practices that enable on-farm sustainability. So it's brilliant stuff, but it surprised me. It's come out of big business, big agribusiness, big food business, where, you know, I don't know if it was endorsed by the farmers. That's another matter. And then it's a sort of difficult world out there because everybody's having a go one way or another. As I travel around Australia, I do a lot of work in Australia. Here's Coles, which is like our Sainsbury's, if you will, launching their own brand of carbon neutral beef. Sainsbury's in the UK have done the same. Yes, we've got low so low methane beef coming out of Sweden. And as I say, there's legions of carbon promises from farm associations and private brands in farming, you know, including, you know, God love them, thank you very much, Manette, you know, achieving net zero from the National Farmers Union. I mention this one because, look, I'm not endorsing, if you will, Origin Green, why would I? But I am impressed by the fact that in Ireland there's collaboration rather than squabbling across the food industry, if you will. So it's a combination of farmers and food companies working together. That strikes me as a good idea. So from a UK back to UK consumer information, AHDB stuff, what are consumers concerned about? Well, you can read it yourself there. It's from, you know, strong down to weaker, and yes, you know, work it out yourself. So this is what consumers in the UK think are important when it comes to environmental impact. But let's not, we should remember, again, AHDB is not all environmental buzzwords are understood, and consumers are much more familiar with food-related terms. So if you look at this rather complex diagram, on the left-hand side, the vertical, it's have you ever heard of? And then across the horizontal is if you have, how much do you know about it? And it's revealing because, you know, consumers, yes, they understand what organic food is. Yes, they've got plant-based. But if you go down the other end, they know little about and understand bugger all about, for example, regenerative farming. It's intriguing that, say, PepsiCo will use that, McCain's will use that in a major advertisement, which is aimed at consumers, and yet in the UK, so the survey data tells us, most consumers have little or no knowledge of what the hell regenerative farming is. I think more interesting is the stuff in the middle, where if I see various associations or companies making claims about net carbon, net zero, whatever it might be, that's a most confusing area for most consumers. And what's more, it drives them to believe that it's a lot of greenwashing, frankly. And if I look across the world, and again go back to the survey data, is it right round the world is the same level of concerns? As it happens in Europe, one way or another, that we seem to be more enviro-conscious in terms of A, being aware of the issues, and B, modifying our purchase behavior for food to reflect our concern about these issues. As you can see, you know, the green for Europe is higher than in most other regions of the world. MEA would be Middle East and Africa, just by the by. What concerns me, if you look at North America, which actually principally is the USA, is that over 50% from this survey, and it's good data, are eco-dismissers. And when I work in the US, which I do on a regular basis, then I've got to be careful talking about climate change because that's perceived to be a political statement, which astonishes me. It's not a political statement, it's a statement of fact, for goodness sake. Moving on, yes, we're moving towards eco-scores, and I was pleased to see that IGD, the very good trade association in the UK, the research association, so backed by the food industry, is going to unveil its universal food and drink eco-label plans. And I'm looking at you and saying, look at the products that you produce. You've got to say, will they be a green traffic light, gives the tick, on eco-label, or will there be the red traffic light, which is the manifestation of the devil? Good thing from our perspective is that across Europe, farmers are trusted. I mean, it's a fact. They're the more trusted elements in the overall food system. And as we've heard through the last couple of days, the majority of UK citizens really do feel positive towards British agriculture. That's great. So what do I think it all means? First of all, farmers produce primary foodstuffs, not food manufacturers. Okay, one. Farm businesses produce most of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with food production, you know, the scope 3 emissions, etc. There's a long list, I hope I've shown you, of those with a commercial, social, or emotional interest in food production, and they're all noisy. And many of these groups are substantially better resourced in terms of pounds than UK farmers, and that's not going to change, notwithstanding that the DEFRA guy said he's going to pop some lapwing money into to the pot through this year. But I think farmers are most unlikely to benefit significantly from additional monies from the public purse in the medium term, for my mind. UK consumers have a high level of trust in UK farmers relative to other food industry players. Brilliant. And the majority of British consumers are positive towards British agriculture. And mind you, let's remember, British consumers also like eating food that comes from outside the UK, and they've done so for centuries, for goodness sake. Often they're confused about environmental buzzwords, and that increasingly makes them suspicious of greenwashing. Consumers' trust in British farmers and our agriculture provides the farming sector, I think, with genuine leverage when collaborating with other powerful food industry players, including government, on environmental issues. And it just makes common sense, doesn't it, that the farm sector should lead on issues relating to the environmental impact of food production, albeit in collaboration with other key sectors. And just to finish, I mean, the greening of food production, the greening of everything is inevitable, thank the Lord. But from a farmer perspective, I know one thing for certain. For farmers, you go green or you go broke. Oh, and just as I was putting these slides together just before Christmas, there was this volcanic eruption in Iceland. And it just reminded me, it was a humbling moment. You think that, look at the human insignificance and you know, the power of nature. It's just sort of overwhelming. We've caused damage to our environment, and I just hope we can repair it. And thanks very much.